right, welcome everyone to the June Town Hall. We're so excited that you're here. We have a full agenda for today, so let's jump into it. So before we get started, let's go to the next slide. We're going to get started with some quick ground rules. First up, we ask that you stay on mute just to minimize any background noise. If you have any questions, put them in the chat, and we will get to those during the Q&A portion at the end of today's call. Also, the recording, event notes, and the Q&A will all be posted on a Confluence shortly after this event. So I'm going to quickly go for the agenda. I'm going to start out with our monthly satisfaction survey. Then we're going to jump into addressing some of the SaaS stability issues that we've run into and our next steps with that. After that, we have our data camp materials showing you where those are available. We also have a new best practice on how you can create help desk tickets. Then we are going to talk about some new data backup and recovery policies. We're going to provide some updates on the Ambari decommission. And then lastly, some special announcements on the Databricks SQL cluster coming soon to the environment. And then lastly, we're going to be ending with our Q&A. So let's first jump into our first agenda item, and that was the poll that I mentioned. So let's go to the next slide. In a moment, you're going to see a poll pop up on your screen. You're going to have around 3 minutes to answer these questions. Make sure that you scroll down just to address all of them. If you're not a user of our environment and just visiting the call today, you don't have to participate. And this is a completely optional survey, but we do want our users just to answer these just because we want to gather your feedback and continuously improve the environment and user experience for you guys. So this is going to pop up your screen. So you're going to see that there. Around 7 questions. There's going to be about 3 minutes for you to answer these. And then after this, we'll move into our next agenda item. All right. Thank you so much to all who have participated. I'm going to end the poll here. And again, the results will be used to improve our tools, trainings, and offerings. And if there's any feedback that you wanted to provide that you couldn't fit into the survey, feel free to submit it via our email address. I will put that in the chat, and I'd be happy to take in that feedback and address those needs. So at this point, let's go to the next slide. I'm going to hand things over to David Chain, who's going to address some of the SaaS stability issues with database connections and our next steps. So now to you, David.
Thank you, Rachel. Recently, we've had some SaaS stability issues. You, the users, have submitted tickets and let us know when the system's down. And I wanted to just give a quick update on what we do when we find out there's a SaaS stability issue, the actions we take, and what we're doing in the future to keep the system up and stable and reliable for the users. We did on the most recent issue, we were investigating it, and what we do is we bring the system back up for the first step, and we get everybody up and running so you can do the jobs that need to be done. You can run your reports and use the data. But beyond that, we engage with SaaS professional and technical services to troubleshoot the issue deeper and try to find the root cause. So when tickets are open and we actually have a down system, we do what they call a root cause analysis, and we go into troubleshooting what the main problem is and how to fix it. And so we're still engaged with SaaS professional technical service on a couple of those root causes to get those resolved. And again, to bump up that stability and reliability of the SaaS services. On Monday, the 26th, we encountered some performance issues with the CDR, with the environment, that would lead us to believe it was from SaaS. It was a SaaS issue, but in fact, we're having an issue with our AWS environment and the RDS services. What that means is the amount of work that was being processed, the process requests, we were reaching capacity very quickly from some jobs that were running that we didn't realize were running. So we planned this unplanned maintenance alert, and we sent out alert to all of the users of the community to let you know that we were going to do some upgrade improvements. We did those improvements. We jumped from 4 CPUs in our system to 16 CPUs. And what we saw the very next morning, we really waited until the next morning to see what would we learn from that, besides just immediately that same night. What we saw the next morning is a vast improvement, a significant improvement in performance, in reliability, but that doesn't mean, oh, we're happy with this and we're done. To keep monitoring the SaaS stability issues and reliability, if you go to the next slide, Julia, this is what we're doing as future actions. We're going to continue to modify our real-time alerts. And we also have now in place an after-hours emergency support team. So when those late night submittals come in, when you let us know in the middle of the night, or we get a proactive alert that the system is down, the after-hours SOS team can reach out to our SaaS admins, and they can alert them and wake them up in the middle of the night, and they will get on the system right away and start troubleshooting and start the whole entire root cause analysis process. But our number one concern is getting the system up as quickly as possible so that you're not impacted when you come in the morning and need to do your work. Part of our stability work is to continue to automate as much of the process, much of the code and deployment as we can for SaaS, rather than have it be a manual process. Less hands on the keyboard when you're doing coding in this sense, less chance of mistakes. If we automate the processes that have to work every night and come up, better chance of improving that reliability and performance. And we are actively working on being as proactive with the user community as we can, letting you know when there'll be downtimes or when there's a major issue, when you can expect it to be back up. There's always room for improvement in this area, and myself and the team were working on making sure we get those communications out in a timely manner so you know how it's going to impact your day. Last but not least, I just want to say, if you to continue doing what you're doing as our user base, please submit an email, send an email if you need help, or use the Slack channel so a ticket will be open for you. Our SaaS admins look at those tickets constantly during the day to figure out what they need to work on and address those issues as they come in. And of course, if you have questions for me, I'm on Slack as well. You can Slack me if something specific comes up, and I will respond. I'm not shy. I'm always available. And we take the stability issues very serious on the platform team. We want to keep the system up and running and healthy for you. And that's my update. I believe we're going to have a Q&A session, Rachel. So if any questions come in, I'll be here to help answer them.
Wonderful. So now I'm going to hand things over to Brian Fagnani. He's going to be covering two topics for us today. First, talking about the data camp materials, as well as this new best practice on creating help desk tickets.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. So the spring 2023 data camp material, so all the videos, if you want to go to the next slide, actually, are currently available. It can be found under the CCSQ community and under the data camp. We have the videos and all the Q&As available from those sessions. If you have any difficulty or any issues or questions, definitely feel free to Slack me or reach out. Next slide. So the next thing that we're going to discuss is creating help desk tickets. And really, it's not that anybody's doing anything wrong. What we're trying to do is make a few suggestions or improvements through this process. And the goal is to be able to resolve your issues as quickly as possible. And there's a few things that we can do to be able to do that. So one is, there's obviously, like David was just speaking to, that you can send it through email, Slack. You can also use the CCSQ support central to create a ticket. And that is actually, is it okay if I steal the screen share for just a moment? I will share my screen. If you go to CCSQ Data and Analytics, you go to Community, and then you click on Data Camp. That is where you will find all the videos as well as the Q&As. Or find this where we actually have this at. So if you go to back at the very top right here, CCSQ Support Center, you click on that, come up. And under Program, you'll select the CCSQ and then fill out all the information, and it'll walk you through. Julie, do you want to pull up the slide deck?
And Brian, I did put those links in the chat as well.
Okay, thank you so much. So creating a help desk, as we talked about that. Communication, so our ideal communication, because our goal is to resolve your issues as quickly as possible, is Slack. So when your ticket comes in, you will see what we try to do is, if you are on Slack and you're using Slack, you will see one of our help desk engineers reaching out to that. In email, we will do email either directly to the user, or we'll use it through a service through the actual ticket itself. Next slide. What we're looking for is when you're creating the tickets, if it's a code issue, if you can provide the entire code that you were having an issue with, screenshots, error logs, if you have any of this, available. And then also, like, if it's going to, like, if you can give us the S3 bucket paths and the specific workbenches that you're having issues with, that way, when we get the initial ticket, we have as much information that we can start really investigating and figuring it out, rather than having delays with going back and forth on trying to gather all that information. I believe that's my last slide, and I'll be here for the Q&A section as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Brian. All right, so let's go to the next slide. At this point, I'm going to hand things over to Gennady Sherman, who's going to be discussing these new policies for data backup and recovery. So now to you, Gennady.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. This is our implement on data backup and restore. And again, I would like to stress that the policy here is used in the context of operational, i.e. technical policies, has nothing to do with data retention policies, which remain the same and governed by CMS record schedule. So what are we planning to implement? Currently, we have two types of file usage, which is active use, meaning that users created files and actively work on them, and non-active use. And what we are proposing, again, this is not set in stone yet. We're giving you early awareness of what's coming, and we will seek your feedback and improve our proposed policies if necessary. So right now, we're proposing to store unlimited, which is of course subject to user storage area, size, number of versions, and the age of each version will be 30 days per version for active use files. Non-active use will be versioned at a rate of 2 previous versions plus 1 current, and age of version will be per your data retention policy, which means how much do you want to keep of your data. And the footnote here says number of restores to be determined. This time we are still designing the best fitting policy about restores. We go to the next slide, please. So how we planning to enhance our restore? The recommendations are to enhance our storage tiering. Currently, we have AWS so-called intelligent tiering, and the tier types per AWS documentation standard, and the current state for that is all actively accessed data will reside in this tier, and that is not changing. The next type, which is less frequent, is S3 standard infrequent access. And that is for data that is not accessed in 30 days. Again, this is not changing. And the third one is Amazon S3 Glacier instant retrieval. Glacier is a metaphorical name for AWS archive, and that is for data that is not accessed in 90 days. Now, what is important for you to note is that the retrieval time for each of those is milliseconds, and nothing is changing at this time. Go to next slide, please. Now, what are we proposing to add is S3 archive. And the future state of archiving and retrieving will be a solution through the portal as self-service to avoid incidental retrieval of archived data. What we mean here as a portal is our data and analytics portal that is currently being designed. And once we implement it, this will be a part of its self-service. So what AWS tier types are applicable to S3 archive? Flexible retrieval. So the recommended tiering future state will be for data not accessed in 13 months. And the retrieval time per Amazon service level agreement is from 1 minute up to 12 hours. Now, why is the number kind of odd, 13 months? So we are counting a year of not accessing the data, and we decided to pad it at this time with 1 month because typically this is intended for submissions that have a certain yearly cadence and a window which is allowed for viewing, appeals, a comment, and such. If it is not sufficient, we will work with you and we can adjust that. And that will, of course, affect our tiering capabilities. And second tier type is deep archive. And that is for data that is really not frequently accessed. In 18, and typically retrieval time is 12 hours or less. And there is another type of tiering, which is not shown here intentionally. We were not considering it, but it is also of the deep archive type, and that extends the retrieval time up to 48 hours, and that is for really infrequently accessed data. If there is such need, we will consider adding it as well, because that is the cheapest possible option per AWS. And of course, what I didn't mention, but it might be obvious, that the faster the retrieval time required, the more we pay per unit of storage. And this is all I wanted to tell you about future plans for data backup and recovery. And the links at the bottom of the page indicate the source of that information. You can go to AWSamazon.com and read everything you may be interested about AWS storage options. That's it for me. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Gennady. I know we have a poll in a couple seconds, but just a quick clarifying question. Is this data in Hive or in Workbench or for both?
It's user data. We don't differentiate here.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Gennady. All right, so let's go to the next slide. We are now going to have a poll. We just want to gather your feedback on these policies and have an opportunity for you guys to be able to share if you have any concerns or thoughts. So I'm going to launch that poll. It should be on your screen. There are 3 questions. Remember to scroll down to answer them all. And I do see there are some questions in the chat. We will get to those all when we reach the Q&A portion. So Gennady will be there during the Q&A to answer those as well. Remember to hit that submit button for your responses to be counted. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Thank you so much for sharing your responses. All right, so let's go to the next slide. At this point, I'm going to hand it over to Ian Hibian, who's first going to talk about the Ambari decommission update, and then both Ian as well as Jared Cruikshank are going to be talking about the Databricks SQL cluster. So Ian, I'll hand things over to you.
Thanks, Rachel. All right, so like Rachel said, the agenda for what I'm going to touch on is more related to the first thing with Ambari. Okay, why are we sunsetting? To give a little history of where we came from, right? So a year ago, we decided to do some market research on new tools, analytical tools, i.e. Databricks and SageMaker, for which we piloted for 3 months to give you guys a more stable system with less maintenance, which we could get rid of Ambari for. Starting last January, we began development for Databricks, and in April, we were able to release the notebook version. And soon, as I will touch on a little bit later, the SQL version will be coming out very soon. And in the logical order of events, the next thing we want to do is to decommission Ambari so that we can give you the full capabilities of Databricks, that being greater performance, it being more cost efficient, for all of us, as well as less maintenance. So the first couple speakers here, you heard about all the issues we were having last week related to SAS and Ambari. Well, this is going to help most of those efforts, right? In having a less monolithic and legacy platform, which doesn't go down all the time, for all of you to be able to meet your deliverables on time. So this is going to be the top priority once we release the SQL feature for Databricks. So the logical steps here, right, are to get you all, I'm going to be working with you as well as some other members of my team individually with each org to get you all connected to Databricks. Our goal is by fall 2023 at the latest. We currently are working on the migration scripts for the Hive to Glue migration, which will be done during a maintenance weekend after we all are migrated off of Ambari and onto Databricks. And then from there, it's simply just being able to turn off the lights of Ambari, just double checking everyone is off, all the data is migrated, and then we can successfully turn that off. Next slide, please. So before that can happen, right, and I know you're all waiting for this, the next big feature we're going to be releasing is the SQL cluster. All right, so what does this mean? If you are a SASPI user, any BYOA tool user, this is where you will be able to connect SAS or any of those tools to a Databricks cluster to utilize the power and efficiency of Databricks instead of Ambari. Originally, we were going to, this was just be a feature turn on one day and it was going to be released to everyone. We had to switch things up a little bit and do this in phases. So we are currently finishing up our testing, dotting our I's and crossing our T's. The features we want to make sure are released in that MVP release for you all. So it's a good product for you to use. The first phase will be for SASPI users. Anybody who uses a Spree server, that's who I'm looking at right there. Another phase will be for BYOA users. All the tools that would classify under that. We will have a phase for that release, along with documentation on how to change your settings and the network configurations needed to connect. And then lastly, it's the CAS libs. So we own obviously the CAS libs, and we will be doing that within 2 maintenance events. So we're going to migrate half of the data one maintenance event, and then the second half we'll be migrating the other half. So originally we were going to go with a PAT token for you to connect, but due to some configuration issues and wanting to get this out timely with other competing priorities, we decided to go with the service principal and a token that way. So all of those will be generated for you prior to our full release to the user community. And then the big question, when is this going to be released, Ian? July 2023. I promise you this will be out within the next few weeks. We have been working very, very hard on just making sure that it is not a buggy product. We want to make sure that it's suitable for all your needs. Like I said, we're doing our last testing just to make sure the performance will be up to par. So next slide, please. All right, Aaron, I just saw that question just to quickly answer it now. So the CAS lib one will be done one half in July, second half will be in August, but the other 2, yes, those will be in July. So almost all of them except for the second half of the CAS libs. So what's coming next? Obviously, as I just touched on, the SQL cluster. The biggest focus after that is the Ambari decommission. There will be communications for that. Like I said, I'll be setting up calls with a lot of you to help you along this path. And after that, a SQL warehouse will be coming in a few months. For that to be enabled, we have to get everyone fully off of Ambari. So that's on. Once everyone's on and the lights are shut off, we can be able to get that set up. So as far as enhancement and education, one big thing that I've seen I need to do a better job of is more R training. That is something that we're prioritizing with our user research team and training team for our next PI. Like I said, there's a lot of competing priorities right now, but I know that is something that you all want to see. So trust me, that's definitely high on my list of things to get out to you all. Other educational opportunities we're looking at, more so AutoML education, and we will be releasing more so like a shared notebook related to best practices with Python, SQL, And that shared user space that you have in your notebooks, where soon, or will be coming out soon, is more so the best practices for those. And then more so feature enhancements, right? We're looking for, we have some features for personal compute. So the ability to be able to change your compute resources individually is by request only, and it is something that will be at the top of our list once this SQL notebook is out, along with obviously getting off of Ambari. So that is one thing, that one major piece that we'll be working on, along with all of the educational pieces. So, right, you have this tool, this great tool, powerful tool that we're all excited about. Now, how can we educate everyone into using it and utilizing it the most performant way? So that is on our bill of list to complete in the next PI or so. I think that's most of what I wanted to touch on. Can you go to the next slide, please? So support, this is pretty much the same thing I always usually touch on, right? If you have help desk requests, please use the Help Service Center SOS channel. From there, they create tickets and we move through the tiers of importance for getting those errors dealt with. I will say that we've implemented, as for some transparency, I'm trying to figure out where the most issues are lying right now. So when I talked about the R training, that spawned out of a lot of requests for some more R, or I guess lack of education for that R coding. I do follow that pretty intensely. We meet as a team once a week for knowledge sharing on how to deal with some of these help desk tickets. So we'll be getting a lot better as we move forward. And I think I touched on that in data camp, but as we start to get more knowledgeable about this product, you'll see a lot of those help desk ticket time frames be reduced. And then lastly, for any training requests, please have your program manager or product lead, or however your organization does it, put in a request on our CCSQ site. I do follow that every week, so please don't hesitate. I don't care how small it is or whatever training you need. I would just want to keep track of it so that I can put it into our backlog. And I think that is all I wanted to touch on. Next slide, please. So I'm going to pass it over to Derek now. So he is our lead for the SaaS integration Databricks. So he's going to demo some of the features there that you should look forward to. So over to you, Derek.
So I'm going to walk through some demos of new, but some modifications that have been made to some of the old auto exec macros that a lot of users are probably using today and would be familiar with on accessing data out of the Hive database tables using SAS, and the modifications that have been made to be able to direct to point it to Databricks instead of how it is pointing to Ambari. And again, as has been mentioned, this is something that we're slowly releasing out to be able to help us with understanding how to properly tune the new Databricks notebook SQL cluster regarding all of the different users that may be hitting the data, and making sure that it's got enough memory, enough CPU, worker nodes, things of that nature, to be able to really take on a large amount of processing. So what I'm showing you now isn't necessarily available to all users, but it will be eventually as we slowly roll it out, more and more groups, and again, do more and more tuning of the cluster to then be able to allow everybody to then use these updated macros to connect to Hive database tables using the Databricks cluster rather than the Ambari cluster. As Ian mentioned, the way that things are going to be working is through service principals and those types of accounts that everything will be taken care of as far as connections go on the back end for all users. The only thing the users will need to do is utilize these particular macros and identify what group or service account they would like to use when connecting to Databricks, as well as identifying that they want to connect to Databricks. So a brief example here is going to be this %list groups macro that any user will be able to run. And what it's going to do is generate an output that will tell you how many and which Active Directory groups your account currently belongs to. And if your account only belongs to one Active Directory group, which is going to be the vast majority of users on the system, then it won't be required of you to have to submit which group you'd like to use to connect to Databricks. By leaving that parameter blank within the macro call, it will automatically connect you to the one group you belong to, and all of your connections and access to specific tables and databases will be driven through that service. As you can see here, I belong to 2 different groups. So basically what that means is that I'm going to have to tell the macros which group to connect to Databricks with when I want to connect. So one example, a pretty common macro that users may use now would be like a list tables macro, where you just want to see what tables are available to you within a particular database. How that currently works is that it's going to connect to the Ambari cluster, and it's going to produce all of the available database tables that are out in that Ambari cluster database that is accessible to you. And for some reason, I do think we are having a little bit of some contention at this moment, which is fine, because what I can show you is that the use of Databricks will get around that contention. So like I mentioned, you do not have more than one account. You can simply add this additional parameter of use underscore DBX equal to Y in your call. And that will simply go ahead and run and connect the account you're using you belong to. We are slowly rolling this out, so not anybody can just go out there and try and use this. It will error out on you. So please, unless we reach out to you saying you are, here's how to use it, please do not try and attempt to use this. But what you'll see here is that when I try and use it without specifying an account, it's going to come back and say it can't connect because I've got more than one account. I need to specify which one of these accounts I want to use to connect to Databricks with. So by simply adding that group connection here that I can copy and paste from the output, and again, telling it to use Databricks, I can then run it, and everything is going to point to the Databricks cluster to execute on rather than the Ambari cluster. As you can see here, this is all of the different output database tables that are within this DASI Simplicity Hive database. As we mentioned, there are ways to connect with an implicit connection to Databricks. Something that we really, really want to try and drill home with best practices across the user community is that an implicit connection is not going to take all of the performance gains that you will receive from the Databricks cluster because you are connecting SAS to the cluster and processing everything on the SAS compute servers. So it is highly recommended that you utilize the specific macros that are developed, and you're using an explicit pass-through connection where you are pushing all of your processing onto the Databricks cluster. And from there, whether you want to bring it back into a SAS data set or you want to write it to an output database table, all of that is still available to you based on downstream processing. But again, you are pushing everything to Databricks to be processed on that cluster to take as full advantage of the ability for that cluster to spin up multiple CPUs across many, many worker nodes. And that is where you're going to get as much of a performance boost as possible when you are pushing it to process on the Databricks cluster. So we do have the old way where we do a libname connection, right? And you're using the Hadoop engine, and you may be familiar with this hive underscore libname macro, or you're basically creating an implicit connection to a database. This is going to go away, and we are going to actually have a simple macro call called dbx underscore lib, where this is going to actually create that libname connection for you in the background. Again, if you only have one group, it's simply saying what you want your libref to be and what schema you want to connect it to. Because I have multiple groups, I also want to say that I am using my QDAS group that I want to use to connect to the cluster. And so by running this, I'm able to create this implicit connection to this DASI Simplicity database, where you can now see in your libraries bar, you've got all of the different tables in that Hive database that are available to you. So I'll clear that, and real briefly, I'll talk just a little bit about a couple of additional ways where we are using the explicit connection. Now, a lot of you are probably very familiar with your processes when you're reading from database tables and you want to write to another database table. That obviously you would run your Hive drop table statement to ensure that the table you're about to create does not exist. And then you would run the Hive execute SQL macro, where you are pushing all of the processing and all of the querying onto the database engine, and then you are writing out to an actual database table. One thing to note, you may have syntax in there, which is how you want that database table to be stored. In this instance, a lot of the times in the past, we've recommended using stored as Parquet syntax so that you're storing your database table as a Parquet file. It helps with compression. It helps with a little bit more increased performance down the road when you're using the table based on how the data is stored and retrieved within a Parquet file. This syntax is no longer going to be needed. When you're creating a table with the Hive execute SQL and you're writing it to a database table, it is defaulted on the database SQL cluster that it will be stored as a Parquet file already. So using this stored as Parquet syntax will not work. It will likely just throw you some sort of a syntax error. So it's something to note within your processes when you are moving towards the Databricks to eliminate that sort of syntax from your code. Again, here, simply reading a database table and writing to a database table is all this is going to do while I'm telling it to use Databricks. And I'm also telling it what group I want to connect to. However, if you only have the one group, you only need this one parameter that just says use _dbx is equal to a y. So executing that will simply determine if this table exists, drop it and purge it if it does, and then write to that table based on the SQL query that execute onto the Databricks notebook cluster. All right. The very last one I want to touch on here that we can leave a little bit of time for Q&A is the explicit connection again, where we are pushing all of the processing onto the Databricks cluster. However, we want to return the results back to a SAS data set, whether it is a SAS data set within the temporary work library, or maybe it's within a permanent library where you want to store it onto your workbench. That is the select to data set macro. And currently, again, it is the same exact syntax. However, it's just an additional parameter where we identify that we want to use the Databricks cluster instead of Ambari. And again, if you belong to more than one group, you would just input what group you want to use to connect. Also, simply using this will execute everything, reading from the database table and then returning it back to a SAS data set. As you can see here in my output data tab, all of the data is now in a SAS data set stored in the SAS work library. As far as performance, there's been testing done, there's been comparisons done between the current Ambari cluster and the new Databricks cluster. Obviously, if there wasn't better performance, I would not be going to the Databricks cluster. To give a little bit of a background on some testing that we've done, pulling some Part B carrier claims at the line level, we were able to successfully pull 12 months worth of claims, pushing it all and writing it all to the Databricks cluster. And we pulled that in a little bit less than 3 minutes. That's not to say that's going to be the baseline to expect with performance, because there was no contention on the cluster, which is why we are slowly releasing this out to the different user groups to help us tune and understand exactly what this cluster needs to be regarding size, CPU, memory, and worker nodes. But that query, that same exact query did take me well over 3 hours to execute on the Ambari cluster. Seeing a difference of a 97% decrease in processing time is fantastic. Obviously, there is no contention, but getting anything that's significantly better than over 3.5 hours down to, even if it might be 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, is going to be a significant reduction in time when it comes to using SAS to extract from Hive database tables, whether it be claims data or whatever it is else that you may be pulling from. So I want to stop there, make sure we got plenty of time to ask questions or answer questions and things.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Derek. All right, so let's jump into the questions for the Q&A. So the first, Ian, I'll direct this to you. I know you discussed multiple, phases of release for Databricks improvements or just Databricks enhancements. Can you just clarify how many phases there will be and releases for each of those phases, the targeted releases?
One deals with the users, the spree users. Okay, so SAS via connects that way. And then there's going to be a release in regards to any BYOA tool. Those will be probably pretty similar time-wise. That's the heads up for that. And then the third one is kind of split up into two for CAS libs. Since we own those and we need downtime to migrate those, that'll be done during maintenance events. So we do our maintenance events every first Friday of every month. So one will be done in July, one will be done in August.
Great, thank you. All right, next question. Is there any kind of architecture design graphic that can be shared so I can understand what's going on and what is changing? I think this might also have to reference the Ambari decommission if I recall correctly.
Can you repeat that one?
Yeah, I think a user was just looking for an architecture diagram could be shared just so they can better understand the changes that are going to occur in the environment. Do we have something available now, or is that something we could develop in the future for a future town hall?
Yeah, I think we can pull something together. We have a few draw IOs that I think would be super beneficial. So let me write that down and we can get that coordinated.
Great, thank you. All right, let's go to another question here. One is referring to the Luster file migration. I think this was referenced in a previous town hall as well as in previous communications, but is there a formal schedule yet for which teams will migrate in regards to the pending Luster file migration? And Danielle, I know Mohammed's out, so I'd like to point that over to you to see if you would know.
So the team is actively working on a schedule and we will communicate those details out as soon as we.
Great, thank you, Danielle. All right, so next question, Gennady, I'll point this one over to you. Will these storage tiers affect how we access these files? We often access end of year files during the next end of year. Would we need to change path of library on the workbench?
So for the tiering, no. They'll appear just like they appear now. And then for the second that we're going to have around archiving, which we won't do the short term, those ones will not appear in your workbench anymore, but you will have the ability to unarchive them via the portal, but we're not going to enable that until we have that ability to manage whether those artifacts are archived or unarchived in the portal.
Great, thanks, Aaron. I'll direct another question to you as well. Is it archived? Let me read this correctly. Is it archived user specific or only data that no one has accessed for 13 or 18 months respectively?
It's total, so it's not user specific.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, Ian, another question for you. Is there any documentation showing us how to access the SAS workbench using Databricks RCluster?
So that is one thing that we are going to share. I spoke about that notebook that we're working on right now, and we're going to do the best practices that'll be included in it. So, and also I think for the next town hall that'll be more so the demo to go over those best practices too. Be on the lookout for that.
Great, thank you. And Derek, question for you. I know you just performed a demo, but a user asked if this example code could be made available somewhere for the users to review on their own.
Yeah. We'll release all of this out as we work with each of the different organizations that are moving over, and we'll make sure that we've got all of this available with plenty of documentation out online on Confluence for users to be able to use as well, so that it's all available and easy to be copied and pasted and manipulated.
Thank you so much, Derek. And looking at the time, I think that will conclude our call for today. I know there were a couple more questions in the chat, but I think some of our folks were answering those during the call, but we will also publish those out on Confluence as well. So just a quick plug, our next town hall will be on July the 26th. Please note that now our calls have moved to Wednesdays at 1 instead of previously Thursdays at 1. So just make a note of that. Save those times on your calendar. So again, special thanks to our speakers for coming and speaking today. And then again, special thanks to the community for joining us. And I hope you have a great afternoon. Thanks, everyone.